Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Welcome to BCCIE's virtual forum on the impacts of COVID-19 and next steps for the K-12 sector. My name is Randall Martin, Executive Director of the BC Council for International Education, and I will be today's moderator. We've got over 130 people signed up for today's session from a diverse number of communities within the K-12 sector, within British Columbia and outside of British Columbia. Thank you all for joining us in what I trust will be an insightful discussion on pertinent and pressing topics facing BC schools as we navigate the COVID-19 crisis and focus on taking stock, moving forward, and recovery in the next months. Today's event evolved from a recent survey BCCIE conducted with stakeholders in the international education sector, undertaken to better understand how the pandemic has impacted planning and operations as they relate to international students. I hope today further contextualizes our findings. Before we get started, it's important to acknowledge that at BCCIE, we live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coastal Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Now on to a few housekeeping items. Attendees will be muted during the webinar. If you submit a question to our panelists during the broadcast, please type them into the question box in your control panel. We'll try to get to these at the end of the discussion. If you require technical assistance during the webinar, please also use the question box and our communications team will help answer your inquiry. Now, we are very fortunate today to have a very strong group of panelists with years of experience in the international arena, working from different positions and bringing different perspectives to the conversation. I would like to welcome our panelists and ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves, their names, titles, and districts. So Sherry, let's start with you and go from there.
Thank you, Randall. My name's Sherry Wakefield, and I'm the Managing Director of the Gulf Islands International Program, which is in School District 64 on the beautiful Gulf Islands, which none of you are allowed to come visit right now. The joke. So I've been working in international ed as a homestay coordinator, a student services coordinator, and now, excuse me, as a managing director. And so I've been doing that for over 20 years now. I'm pleased to now welcome Michael.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm Michael Frankowski. I'm the district administrator of West Vancouver Schools International Program, which means I direct the team here. And I first started in post-secondary, so I feel quite lucky to have that perspective. Then I moved to K-12 in Surrey, and I've been here in West Vancouver for about 8.5 years. Like Sherry, coming up on 20 years involved with international education, everything from the proverbial mailroom up to the director level. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Jay Ewells, Superintendent of Schools in the Powell River School District. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, involved in international education. I'm on the board of the BC Council for International Education, been involved in offshore inspection, and happy to be here today. And as Sherry said, we don't have many ferries coming in and out, and we're pretty happy about that right now.
Great, thanks all very much. Just to create some context for the session and for the sector, international education is a very important part of BC's education ecosystem in terms of diversifying our classrooms and communities, offering intercultural experience, opportunity, and growth to our own students, and inviting students from around the world into our classrooms and communities. It is at once both a social good and an important economic generator for our districts and institutions. Canada and BC have been enjoying rapid and some might say unsustainable growth for over a decade, while many other competitor countries have stubbed their toes or briefly fallen out of favor with key markets. We are one of the most desirable destinations in the world, and BC is one of the most desirable within Canada. Per capita, BC has the most international students in the country. We are notoriously lax in Canada at keeping up-to-date and relevant statistics, but the best information we have is that in December of 2019, we have had over 640,000 international students in Canada, a 160% increase over 10 years, contributing over $20 billion to the Canadian economy and schools. In BC, we have over 160,000 international students, over 20% or over 13% of them in the K-12 sector. There are over 30,000 jobs in BC directly tied to international education, primarily the revenue stream from international students, and a contribution well in excess of $5 billion annually to the province. Now, people have long warned us, remember not to rely too much on the income that international students generate. It can disappear. Remember SARS, remember H1N1, remember the currency crisis, remember mad cow disease, remember not to put all of your eggs in one basket, diversify. Remember that nothing lasts forever, and as George Harrison says, all things must pass. Well, this pandemic has certainly captured our attention, and I think it is safe to say that we are listening now. So I'd like to stop talking, and I'd like to begin by asking our panelists to provide a brief overview of their district's experiences navigating COVID-19 and any best practices learned while developing their responses to the pandemic. So Sherry, let's begin with you.
Sure, thanks, Randall. So as many of you know, working in international education, you have to have two skills, and that's one is to be really flexible, and the other is to be resilient. I mean, we've seen politics change, economics change, wars, and now, yes, pandemic. So our jobs are never boring. Our experience in School District 64 with COVID-19 has actually been one where there's a lot of positives in it, believe it or not. I found that we really seek the teamwork mentality, like we all can have something to contribute, and working as a team, we're a lot more strong. We're getting a lot more work done, and we're finding a lot of us have hidden talents that we didn't really know existed before. So that's a positive with it. The thing that's difficult and probably what we're not used to is we've never had this before. So we have nobody to go to for advice and say, how did you deal with this? We're all learning on the fly, which is very interesting. And we also have learned quickly to just listen to our public health officer and follow her direction. So a lot of the stuff we're doing in our program comes from Dr. Bonnie Hendry's recommendations. We follow those and just keep that to where we are right now. So the other thing, what's very difficult is things are constantly changing. What I might say to you today can be completely different tomorrow, and so on. And so we're forever being asked, what if, what if, what if? And our answer has to be, well, for today, yes. However, let's talk again in 2 weeks. That's pretty much where we're at in our district right now.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Micah, what's been your experience in West Vancouver?
So give a little background of our district for those who don't know us. We're a medium-sized program. We're one of the original programs, so we've been running over 35 years. And as such, we have a large number of students in a large number of countries. We were alert to COVID very early because we have strong connections in China, but also in Italy. And Italy was one of the first strong cases that we started to study. Our response was to communicate. And I adopted this phrase, progressive elaboration, because as Sherry said, what we know today will change tomorrow. So we probably, and that was one of the frustrations actually, what do you communicate? But keeping in touch with our students, their parents, and our agents was a big part of our work. We had some hierarchy of needs. The number one, when it first came out, was student safety. Then we switched to a sort of a phase 2 with education, with continued learning. And then now we're exploring more the enrollment for next year and beyond. Again, we just kept in touch with our students as much as possible. We managed to move 45% of our high school students home to their home countries. A lot of our elementary students stayed because their parents have houses or apartments here. And once we felt that we de-risked, we really concentrated all of our efforts on how do we make learning happen for these students. One thing we did that I think everyone should do is we kept meticulous data, and we wrote everything down in procedure sheets in anticipation of this ever happening again, or a second wave later on this calendar year or next year, so that when we have staff who are under pressure, they have fly-by-wire procedures, and we know what to expect from the data. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Jay, Powell River.
Thank you. For us, we're a smaller district, but we rely on international education. It makes up about 16% of our high school population. And so there's quite an effect, but I do think kind of addressing this sector, as Sherry said, in international, you're used to working in the gray and ambiguity, and I'm finding that the international staff is faring a little better than others in terms of things changing every day. The rules change, you have to adapt, you have to make do with trying to help students in any way you can. And I think that's something to be said for our sector that we can learn from. For us in Powell River, we're really fortunate to not have any confirmed cases at all, but we still have the anxious students, parents, and employees are quite anxious about what lies ahead. For us, we've created a local framework to support students, and we've really taken great direction and support from the Ministry of Education. They've been excellent in putting out directives almost weekly and daily that can help us change and support students. We've used the Continuity of Learning Guide, and really we've embraced the principles and commitments of our ministry to ensure the health and safety for all students and families, to provide services to support essential service workers, children, and continuity of learning. For us, as many others, the communication is something that I think has been an opportunity from the ministry, from all other districts in terms of sharing protocols and practices moving forward. We've developed, as others have, safety protocols in all our schools for people coming in and out, picking up of materials, handling of materials. We have, our schools are supporting essential service workers' children in Tier 1 and in Tier 2. And we've moved on to supporting vulnerable children in our schools, and we have people starting to come back working one-on-one with children as we move forward. We have, as other schools, a food program supporting our vulnerable families and children. And we've had to work quite diligently with our homestay parents in terms of their anxiety with students leaving, some homestays really not being comfortable, saying they're not sure they want to be in the program moving forward. So I think that's something that we're going to have to address collectively in making those parents feel comfortable in returning. But I do have to say we've had incredible also support in those same homestay parents, supporting through Zoom and FaceTime with the students while they're in their countries. As Michael talked about, we have about 90% of our students went back to their home countries. And so I know we'll be talking a little later, but we do really have some concerns about what that looks like moving forward. And we're now starting to increase activities that are outside of the schools, so not everything is remote, social distancing and trying to find ways to connect with everybody. So that's about what's going on here.
Great, thank you very much, Jay. As we discovered in our survey, one of the main priorities facing K-12 public and independent schools right now is a transition to virtual delivery and how long that will last. Maybe we'll start with you again, Sherry. What communication or support gaps are you facing as teachers migrate content and activity online?
Great, well, thanks for the question, Randall. I actually put this forward to our teachers because they're the ones that are more in the limelight for it. And they had a really good point, and I'm actually seeing it at my own home with my son, is it was assumed that students are really good with online learning. They'll just click on that computer and know what to do, and no, that's not happening. Same with the teachers. They themselves have not been trained, and so they're learning on really quickly as well too. So it wasn't a fast start. It was a very slow start. It's a work in progress. And the joke behind it now with our group is that everybody's going to be really good by the time we go back to school. See, so that was the only one situation. They asked if in the future, like, we should do this no matter what, if they could be trained perhaps better, teachers could be trained better on things such as Zoom or Google, some of the Google Docs, etc. And same with the students. If students could learn a bit more in class on how to deal with that, that would be really helpful in the future. We would also love to have some sort of database where there might be lessons already prepared that they can go to and maybe tweak it to their own class to make it work, so they don't all have to do a lot of the same research. We can share that information with one another. So maybe one big ministry database for all teachers to access.
Great. Actually, my own experience at home was an 11-year-old. His computer apparently works fine for Roblox and Minecraft, but it doesn't work on Google Classroom. I'm not sure if there's a glitch there. Maybe on that same topic, Michael or Jay, do you have anything to add?
I think that the learning opportunities, although again it's ambiguous and gray, those opportunities really have come out in terms of people being creative, and across districts in the ministry, the sharing of best practice has really improved, and I think that that's been a good opportunity.
You're good, Michael? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now, well, thank you, Sherry, thank you, Jay. As we look forward to a possible return of students this fall, maybe Jay, in Powell River, what are schools doing now in terms of preparation? And what are you anticipating classrooms in September will look like? I read something today where they're planning, somewhere in Canada, they're planning on putting tents in the field and use those so they can have smaller classrooms. Is that what Powell River is going to look like in September?
Well, we do have a yurt and a couple of outside classrooms, so I guess we'll consider using them. Good idea. It's a good question. It's one that everybody is grappling with right now, and we're hoping to get some direction this week around what that might look like. There really are a lot of unknowns as we move forward, but I don't think everything will be the same at all. We've learned a lot in general about the spread of any virus or the common cold, and I think a lot of our practices will change as we move forward because we can help people through the regular flu season and cold. You know, obviously we're following the direction of the Ministry of Education and Dr. Henry as we plan. We do know that we have to consider the second wave that may happen, and so we are planning that we can have a seamless transition from in-school learning to remote learning, and we've learned a lot in how we can do that. I think also the opportunity that's come out of this is there are opportunities for learning in the future where students can be connected to their home teacher and be at home if that's something that works best for their learning. I think we can take that opportunity and some of those strategies that we can use moving forward for that. But I think this is really the unknown, and as you know, there's a lot of anxiety for people who've been at home for a long time and working remotely, and we know we have to take smaller steps to get people back into schools, but to feel safe, that it's a safe learning environment, and parents have to feel safe, and I think that that's a smaller piece of how our sector in international is going to feel, because there's even more anxiety around international students returning, and what would that look like, and how can it be done safely. And we know we've done a lot of work over the past years to make it a comfortable place for the integration of international students into our programming. And I think this is something that we're going to have to be very, very careful about as we move forward and recognize people's anxieties, real or perceived, and help them get through them. And I know the ministry and other districts have put out a lot of information around wellness and staying healthy and your mental health, and as you try to work through what this looks like for you returning to work. So hopefully this week we'll get some direction, and we'll be given some time to make everybody comfortable moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Yeah, I understand that Premier Horgan is speaking today to talk about what a plan might look like in terms of sort of easing some of the social distancing. So I'm sure there'll be ramifications for schools as well as for restaurants and other places. Now, on that same question, Michael, West Vancouver, Sherry, Gulf Islands, what are your districts going to look like in September?
Well, I certainly see we're going to have less students. This is my prediction. I predict, that's only predictions, of course, because it could change in a week, that any student that's in our grad program, they'll come back. They're used to their home stays. They'll be able to go back to their home stays, even if it to be in the room for 2 weeks, at least it's a room they know and they'll be comfortable in. I can see those students come back. The ones that are planning not to come for a semester, or even perhaps just a school year, I see them deferring. And that's going to have a lot to do with what happens in the next month or so. If our borders look like they're still going to be closed in July, I would imagine most of those students would be deferring.
Yeah.
I agree with Sherry, but we're coming up onto a pinch point of when we need decisions from other levels of government, because you have to be considerate of a family who has to book a ticket. The homestay milieu has to find a home. They're running out of time to make decisions, and we don't have that information from the federal government. I'm looking forward to today's press conference. I think it will add some stability into our program. I'm going to address elementary students. As I said at the beginning, many of them stayed, and the parent is waiting to see what education will look like, not for the rest of this year, but for next year, because many of our elementary students continue on. We don't have a high throughput. If they get indications that children are going to be able to go back to in-person instruction, I think they will take that as a sign of good faith and some stability, and we're more likely to see their satisfaction. The secondary side of it, I agree with Sherry, that children who have chosen to come to graduate, many times they're too far out of their home system to be able to go back and reintegrate. For those that are coming in for the experience, we can't forget that experience is a big part of the education program. It is the skiing on a Saturday. It is the going to buy things at a grocery store and use your English. So if that disappears, it's a difficult decision for those families.
Absolutely. Now, yesterday, Dr. Henry said, yeah, we're hoping you're all going to stay pretty close to home this summer. There won't be any international trips happening. Frankly, for those of us in districts with the road warriors who spend a fair bit of time out in the field, I think some of that may happen in the fall as well. I don't see our major Study in Canada fairs or agent fairs blossoming back in a big way this fall. So in that context, and as we discovered through our survey, we've learned that a lot of international educators are significantly altering their plans for student recruitment. So what new virtual models or platforms are you seeing early success with? Are you planning to trial? And maybe we could start with you, Michael.
Okay, so the vast majority of our students come through our agent network. And although we recruited extensively overseas, we always maintained a modicum of online connection, especially with the individuals at the agencies with whom we've had decades-long relationships, many of us. So online wasn't new. And then bring in COVID, and all of us are on Teams or Zoom meetings every day. So we've been able to use that for the communication. I think one of the struggles is that I feel international programs are living simultaneously in the past, the present, and the future. We still have to deal with students who went home and make it right by them. We have to work with the kids who are doing continued learning, and now we have to think of enrollment. So that makes virtual recruiting, in my opinion, for K-12 in its infancy. So I have tried some virtual meetings with parents, but one of the impediments has been the unanswered questions, the unknown. So they will always, after you get through your elevator speech about your school district, they'll always come back to the tough questions. What will the classroom look like in September? So it's a little bit more difficult to do that virtually. With the agents, agent training has been great because we've been able to use some agencies are not very busy, so we've taken that opportunity to meet with their teams, give them training on what we are, where we are, and so on. There's been some staff turnover, so I've used that, and it's a little bit easier in the virtual world to speak in a business-to-business voice because engaging with a parent in a recruiting posture virtually is not as easy as it is in person. We're looking at some late spring virtual fairs. Some of the agencies have jumped on it. I think we're seeing some leadership in Korea. I also had a German online platform that was relatively dormant, and all of a sudden it sprung to life. So that's good in absence of student being able to visit a brick and mortar place, they've gone to this online resource. So I've seen some more inquiries. To be honest, I'm largely agnostic about what platform it's on because they all seem to be reaching a point of commodification. They all have the same features and they all work rather well. But again, you know, as we saw this morning, as I was prepping for this, a poor internet connection can derail a perfectly well-planned virtual fair. One of the challenges that I think some school districts are facing is that we have to be prudent about our expenditures. We can't go full in onto virtual recruiting when it's unproven, because we're predicting shortfalls, big shortfalls next year. So we're picking a few of them. We'll try those. I don't know how virtual will eventually replace in-person recruiting. I think it's important to remember that we're dealing with minors, and everything is about trust. And the best way for humans to trust one another is do what we do best, be human, meet each other and talk. And when parents can sit with us and ask all the questions and we can answer in an organic way, it's always the best way to make them trust us and ultimately send their child here. And my analogy is the paper brochure. 10 years ago, I was all about, you know, the paper brochure is a thing of the past, and I'm moving everything to our web assets because we don't need print collateral anymore. And it's surprising how important that physical thing is for our clients. The view book is emblematic of constancy. The in-person fair is emblematic of trustworthiness and realness. So we'll keep doing the virtual fairs, but we're going to keep an eye on when we open up so that we can reconnect with parents.
Okay, great. Jay, I'm not sure if you're as in the weeds in your district in terms of some of the recruitment, but if you've got a comment on that, or Sherry, in terms of sort of getting students for upcoming terms, going virtually, relying on your agents.
I think for us, we've had fortunate enough that many of you know Bryn Byman, who's been doing our work for 25 years. And really for us, it's not an issue of recruitment. We have the number that we would like. It's really, as Michael said, the unknown of are those students going to be able to be here and continue. And a whole number of them are ongoing students who intend to be here for the whole grad program. So I think it's just sitting in terms of the unknown and will they be able to be here with us is really the issue for us. It's not an issue of recruitment.
Sherry?
Thank you, Michael. Well said. The trust is such a huge thing. I've been doing some online stuff in advance because we're a small program and we can't afford to go to a lot of different countries. And we have been successful in having 20 different countries represented at our school. So I'm delighted and like to keep that going. But what I have found in the trust is a really good point, Michael, because if I can't meet with those people in person, I've been doing like team training or meeting with an agent who would have 5 or 6 families there to talk with me. I found then the next best step, as close I could get to trust, would be to have a one-on-one Zoom type meeting with those people or Skype. And so they felt they got to know me a little bit better, but there is nothing like face-to-face and them really seeing you and reaching out, shaking your hand, scary thought, and really getting to know you. So that will always be a part of our program. We'll bring it back. We have always had to be select in where we decide to go, the best, best marketing tool that we could find and the best people to send. Yeah, and for training, we've always been able to go to agencies and train their staff. Mexico's an excellent example. They're constantly changing who's on their staff, and so I found the best way to train Mexican agencies is to just do an online training session with them. But again, it's the parents that want to see you in person. It's the kids that want to get to know where they're going, because I think there's nothing better when they come to your school and they see you there. You go, it's you, and they feel, okay, yeah, this is right. I've connected the dots. I'm where I should be.
So I'm getting a sense that people aren't flocking to the big FPP BMI study in Canada. We're not trying to replicate a fair where we have 3,000 people coming by the virtual West Vancouver booth. but you're honing in. It's more boutique recruitment, engaging with families, students, agents on a smaller level. So that's an interesting takeaway. Stepping back a bit on this issue, obviously it's expected that metro and regional districts will experience a steep drop in international student enrollment for 21-22. Retention of students will only account for a percentage of the numbers that our districts are accustomed to. So if international students aren't able to come into Canada, what plans do your districts have to sort of mitigate this issue on a broader level? And I guess at the end of the day, that sort of comes back to the question, how big a core part of your operating budget is coming out of the revenue stream of international students? So maybe, sorry, Sherry, to throw this one at you first, but
that's okay, I could be the guinea pig. Well, for us, it's always been a matter of we don't spend any more than we bring in. So we have to make that budget balance. So we'll try to maintain what we've been doing. Excuse me, there'll be less traveling, so there'll be some money saved there. There'll be probably less activities, some money saved there, less students in the classroom, so money saved there. We're going to just continuing on. We'll have our staff, our international ed staff, maintain, I mean, there's not a lot of us, but we'll maintain what we're doing, because this is going to quickly turn around and we have to be prepared for that. Before we know it, February even, we could have our 60 full-time students back in February. So we have to be prepared, on the ready, still marketing, still learning new things, getting that Instagram going, Facebook, everything. So it's work's not going to slow down by any means, and so neither should the staff.
okay. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Just a couple comments for us. I think have to help with the context also. We're a smaller district, but with one high school, so there is quite the impact. Our budget is about 20 million, and we bring in over $1 million in international, and we look at that dropping in half for September if things don't change. So we definitely have started to make plans, and unfortunately it's in the operational side, not our core services. So some teachers and support workers would be reduced in the international program. We also have always had a philosophy of using our revenue from international as one-time money. We don't use it for our core operations. So I think we're in better shape than others may be. So we take that money each year and we use it for one-year initiatives in terms of learning opportunities for international, but also across our sector. And we determine that in September to make it clear to QP and BCTF that it isn't ongoing money, but it's educational initiative. So I think that's helped us. We're already looking at thinking that if it's not September, that what we will have to do is really push for second semester increases. We've always had a lot of requests, as probably others have, to have winter camps, and we limit them, but our plan would be this year to have winter camps in all of our elementary schools, if possible, so trying to push that back. And then for us, we also, as others, have quite a bit of revenue that comes from summer camps. So, and we are going to look at increasing the capacity, not this summer, but the following summer, to try to mitigate some of those losses. I think the other piece that's important is I was able to touch base with the Assistant Deputy Minister, Keith Godwin, yesterday regarding a couple of key issues that we're all waiting to hear about, and that's really return of international students. And he's assured me that it's high on their priority list and they're trying to get information out as soon as possible. They're working with the federal government on what those policies could look like and what policy amendments could be in place, but there's nothing definitive, but it's certainly right on their radar. The second piece that we're all anxious to hear about is whether or not we'll be able to continue remote learning while the students stay in their home countries. And he said that is high on their priority list, and they do expect to get something out soon, and certainly they want to find a way that we can retain those students until such time as they can come here safely. So, we'll look forward to hearing from him in the coming days.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jay. And Michael, any thoughts on this question? Or?
I think it's been well covered. For a program that's larger, when you have reductions in enrollments, and a lot of districts are in the range of 30 to 50%, it's very difficult to make it up in terms of saving this money on brochure printing or what have you. So it does come down to tough decisions, as Jay had said.
Okay, thank you all very much. Now, before I worked at BCCIE, I worked at SFU for 15 odd years, and one of my former bosses is now retired and living on Salt Spring Island. And I talked to him the other day, and he said the nicest thing about this virus is that nobody tries to hug each other anymore. Virtual fist bumps, and he's not a hugger. Anyway, a question for Sherry, who lives in the most rural district of anyone on the call. Your students need to be in homestays, away from parental care, often with local guardians. Do you have any comments on augmented or reimagined academic delivery and the ongoing and future pastoral care of students, especially but not solely related to accommodation and homestays?
Yeah, actually, well, I'll touch on the homestay part first. We had less than a third of our students return home. So we've got a lot of our students still here and in homestays. And I want to just point out there's one thing that happened with our homestay situation that, again, I'm being positive, is we've noticed our students have bonded a lot more with their homestays than they normally would have. There were students that would have loved to gone out, you know, partying or socializing with their friends and doing activities, which they can't do. And so now they've bonded quite tightly with their host families. And to that end, it's really helped with learning opportunities at home. They've been doing things outside of the school curriculum, such as teaching their native language to the family or learning cooking and doing things like that. So there's some positives that have come out of that. As for, I'm trying to think of, we would love to be able to offer more opportunities, more activities for the students to do if we continue on with this online learning. I think that's the only thing. We want to make sure that they don't become bored and that they also, after time, don't become reliant on their homestays to entertain them. So I would love to look at other ways where perhaps we could hire somebody to teach a painting session or drama or improv or something where it could come into each of their homes and they could do it either alone or with their families. So that's something we're really investigating.
Okay, great. So I've got a question for all of you. When we did our survey, we received a number of comments about the responses of individual districts, but about the need for a systemic coordination, certainly from government and the ministry, both federal and provincial, but also from the K-12 Association, IPSIA, from BCCIE, which we have a mandate to support kindergarten to PhD, public to private. And I'm just wondering if you can suggest one or two key items where IPSIA could, you know, engage in more systemic coordination, liaison with the ministry, that sort of thing. Obviously, it's great to have a superintendent on here. Maybe we could just address that. A number of the questions that we received prior to this issue were related to IRCC. Obviously, we, IPSIA, CAPSI, I mean, there's a number of avenues to try to get there, but a coordinated way to engage with IRCC also would be, I think, of assistance, probably through the ministry. But maybe if you've got a few ideas moving forward on that. Jay.
I think really the two issues that I just pointed out, I think it's important because it crosses all of those sectors, and I think just leaving it to, you know, our ministry, there's strength in having other organizations and other ministries really asking those same questions, because as you can imagine, the federal government is overwhelmed with the work that they're doing now, and none of us know where our priority stands. So I think sticking to those two issues that are emergent and are there now are really important, and I think you know, other priorities could wait.
Okay, thanks. Sherry?
I think just more training in online education. I would love to see that being offered as we speak, even something that teachers and students can look into after hours. So that's one thing I would like more focus on, is training.
Okay. Michael?
My biggest concern, frankly, is how the federal government will react, because I think it's one of the biggest threats to being able to bring students in. We have an excellent situation in BC. When you look at other jurisdictions, we've done incredibly well, and we might be able to do programs that no other province
You froze?
by the federal government. So more connection with them and getting answers to our questions sooner would allow us to communicate to our agencies, to our parents, and have them make a good decision rather than, in the absence of information, simply make the decision not to come.
Okay, thank you. One of our a question from one of our colleagues came in online. All of you can chime in on this, or we may need to go to a higher power. How are schools going to deal with quarantine guidelines should an international student want to return for September?
Well, I think that that's a good question, and I do think that we'll be deferring to guidelines provided to us, which we follow and have. I don't think anybody will be developing their own individual policy or procedure around this.
I think the biggest stakeholder here are the homestay families. They are the ones hosting our students. They would be potentially the ones having to quarantine them. And so we've done a lot of work. We have in-house homestay. We've done a lot of work to try and understand what the common mood is with parents and to give them the best information we have and so on. But that said, with so many things ahead of this, including what the classroom looks like, we've decided to put this one in a box until after the May long weekend so that we have a little bit more information, because you can only call a homestay family so many times before you infect them with what they think is anxiety. And that's the last thing they want or we want. So quarantine's a big question, but a number of things have to fall into place before that. So we've deferred our decision on that for sure.
Barry, any comments? Or?
No, I totally agree with you, Michael. We don't want to overwhelm our homestays with lots of questions. However, we do want to prepare them. So we're working on a plan as well to present something more a little bit later, perhaps mid-June.
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier that, I mean, the situation is changing on the ground daily. We had 8 new cases in BC yesterday, and we're all saying, wow, we're out of the woods, and let's see what happens today. I mean, the situation is changing so rapidly. If you remember Donald Rumsfeld and his discussion of we have known unknowns and we have unknown unknowns. And I think we're still in the position of many unknown unknowns. Most of you will know that we were hoping to host this large API conference here in Vancouver in March of 2020. We had to postpone that to March of 21, and now we have no idea if the provincial health authority will allow groups of more than 500 people to get together within a year. And so there are so many things in terms of conference planning, travel, program development, but also in terms of hosting international students, when and how, that we just don't know. So it's a lot of tea leaf reading, I think, that we're engaged in right now. And we have time for more questions. If anybody out there is listening, please, if you have a few more questions for our panel. But in the spirit of tea leaf gazing, a few other questions we have here. Sherry, are you fielding questions from agents from abroad, for example, on issues such as Canadian border closures, restrictions from students traveling from their home country, or the student's family not feeling it's safe for their child to either travel to or be in Canada?
Yes, and actually the difficult thing, and I think we've mentioned this before, is they want us to pretty much predict for them. Like, what do you think? Do you think it's okay for us to send our students? Do you think school's going to start? Do you think? And we don't know. We can't answer any of those what ifs right now. So what we've done is we've said if things are as they are today, and we've given agents pretty much till the end of June, because we need time to set up courses and homestays and such, to make a decision to either defer a student to next February or the following year, or to cancel for September. We've had to look at putting a deadline on it, because we can't keep waiting and then in August find out these students not coming, yet we've hired the staff to be there for them. We got the homestay all prepared and that. So that's been really tricky because it could change at any time. So I just basically, right now I'm giving them time till the end of June, which is really quite generous. I don't know if a lot of school districts are able or willing to do that. And they've been very appreciative of it, yet there's many agents that are saying, well, are you saying that if we change our mind in April and August that we can't defer then? And so my answer is yes, I am saying that. If you change your mind in August, you cannot defer, you have to reapply for the next semester. So it's been a little bit of tough love with them too, but for our sake, and I think everybody else will agree, is we need to have some deadlines here. We can't just keep going week by week because there's a lot of staff involved.
Okay. Now, just for my clarification, these are district level decisions or practice rather than province-wide. So every district is making its own decisions about deferrals and those sorts of issues?
Yeah, I think they are, but we're also, it's great with IPSIA, for example. We're having a meeting, I think it's tomorrow, to talk about refund policies, a group of people so we can share ideas and pretty much be on consensus, because you don't want to be, well, there's this one school district that will take you no matter what. We all want to be kind of similar and work together. But however, that said, yes, it is up to each and every individual district.
Okay. Jay or Michael, any comments or good?
Nope.
Okay. Good. Okay, another question's come in from online. What is your understanding of the extension of students in country with their permit? Also, a student who left the country with a valid permit, can they apply for the extension and then come to Canada and quarantine? Now we're getting into the weeds on some of these IRCC issues, yeah?
Something I can comment on, sorry.
I turn to CAPC advice. They are in contact with IRCC, so they give us regular updates on a series of burning questions. I try not to go off script with that, so I suggest that people try and get as close to the primary source as possible, because a lot of interpretations of what IRCC does, or if IRCC does a very quick turnaround like they did with study permits and work permits in some sort of excluded entry program, it's better to be just right next to the primary source of info. So check with the work that Bonnie's doing, and I think the latest update came out yesterday.
Yeah.
So that's my way of not answering that question.
Oh, no, good. And I think Bonnie might be on the call. Bonnie, the National Association CAPC, as well as IPSIA provincially, but CAPC is doing a really good job of summarizing and collating IRCC interpretations, and I'm sure a lot of that information can be shared widely with our K-12 colleagues. In the fall, will students be allowed to study blended or hybrid or hybrid face-to-face online programs if they are not able to arrive here on time? For example, if they're arriving in October, and would that be the case, do you think, in your district specifically, a system-wide practice on that, and might that apply to the independent schools?
I think that's the answer we're waiting for from the ministry. We know we can extend that to the end of this school year and into the summer, but a decision about the fall hasn't been made yet, so I think we just have to wait for that direction. Okay.
And one of the questions that's come online is sort of related to that, is how do you plan to manage students who have gone back home and are studying online in a different time zone? So the issue of synchronous and asynchronous online delivery. So Sherry, you're smiling, you must be the expert on that.
Oh yeah, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, Europe, I get the kids in Asia up early and the kids in Europe before they go to bed. But no, our teachers have been extremely flexible. They have, a lot of them have recorded their lessons so students can see it at any time, or they will arrange to meet with those particular students individually. Again, there's not a lot that we've had go back home, probably only about 10 that we have to work around, so it hasn't been too difficult for us here.
Another question from online. Given how well BC has done during the pandemic, do the panelists think that this would be a good selling point for international students? In other words, how relatively safe BC is compared to other locations in Canada or other competitor destinations? And another canned question I was actually going to give you related to this, is this making you rethink your key markets? Are you looking at this as an opportunity to diversify?
I think for us, we certainly will, having no confirmed cases in Powell River and moving forward. It's always a piece in our recruitment that we've used, the safety in Powell River because of our isolation and crime rate and other pieces. So certainly it is something that we look moving forward, unless things change, to use that piece.
I was coached once never to use the word safe because you might get yourself into some unintended consequences, because we all know things happen. I think a lot of our progress and achievement in BC will be tacit. I'll certainly talk about it business to business. I'll be careful when I'm talking to parents about labeling us a safe jurisdiction, or even trying to put us above other provinces. We all try to be very Canadian about it and say we're all in this together. I think the clients will know because they will see our responses. Many of the parents are sending me reactions to all the press conferences, so they're very well informed. And we'll probably let the agents take a bulk of the heavy lifting on describing us as a COVID-safe jurisdiction. It will definitely have a positive impact, though, when you take a look at us compared to other jurisdictions. Parents will know that, and that will be one of their factors in their decision.
Sherry?
Right. Well, we have to be very careful here. I'm sure it's the same with maybe up in Powell River too, that we don't promote this as a safe place to come to because of COVID, for example, because if we did have a big epidemic here on the island, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We don't have the resources, we don't have the hospital staff to take care of a major epidemic. So that would be better for them to be in the city in that sort of situation than it would be to be here. So we wouldn't use that at all as a marketing tool with the word COVID attached to it. However, we do talk about how it is, a nice relaxed atmosphere here. We know one another. You can reach out for help quite easily here, but we wouldn't bring the COVID into the equation.
Great, thank you. We have, it's not really a question, a statement, hoping that the Ministry of Education will permit school districts to provide online learning to new international students, while at this time only the Kamloops School District Business Company has that authorization. We can certainly pass that message along, but obviously that's directly related to some of the conversation today. When you registered for this this forum, there was a link to an infographic of our recent survey, and one of the interesting results was in terms of people looking at diversifying markets away from the traditional markets of China, the K-12 level, certainly Korea, at post-secondary, certainly India, and just some of the places people are interested in looking at for diversity. A number of destinations in Southeast Asia. I know, Michael, you were one of the first pilgrims into Indonesia a number of years ago. But more Central Asia, maybe looking at Africa, expansion of activities in Europe and in Latin America. So it's interesting. It will be interesting to see as an opportunity to look at more diversity in terms of our classrooms, where the different sectors will go, or where different institutions and individual districts will go. We've got about 5 minutes left. The one pressing question, I guess, is, again, it's an unknown question, but we're already aware, and Dr. Fauci in the United States and Drs. Tam and Henry here in Canada are talking about what happens in the fall. In the Northern Hemisphere, the cold season will be back, the flu season will be back, and it will be piggybacking around with the virus, and things won't be back to normal by Halloween. So what happens should this resurface and we lock down again? I mean, just in terms of long-term consequences for the districts. So any thoughts on that?
Well, for us, the ministry's made it clear that we do need to be prepared to be in schools and with very short notice to be able to continue again with remote learning. So I know all districts will be planning to have that in place if that happens. I think there's still a lot of unknowns around international and what that would look like. But certainly everybody, I think in the province, will have a plan in place to move from in school to remote learning quickly.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. A number of them are specifically related to quarantine and boarding schools and some other things. So what I will commit to people on the line here is that we will forward these questions to the Ministry for clarification, to our colleagues at FISA, Federation of Independent School Associations, which sits on our board as well, and we will try to get answers for some of these questions that we haven't been able to address today. I believe this session is being recorded, and it will be available to everybody who's joined in today. And I think we're a couple minutes early, but I was told if you can't strike oil in an hour, quit boring. So it's time to slow down. I would sincerely like to thank our panelists today, Sherry, Jay, and Michael. Much appreciated. We have a couple more of these planned. One next week for private, post-secondary, and language sector, and some activity the following week for the public post-secondary level. So if you're interested in participating in those as well, we look forward to seeing you then. And so at that point, I will thank you all for joining us this morning and wish you a happy day. As one of my colleagues says, stay positive and test negative.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you.